and it was like, and if he'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot, kind of thing. Not like, he owned you from everybody else.
Yeah, not a fan of this moment. Faye, any thoughts on this moment?
Some of there's moments in this are really like soap opera-y, if that is in fact a word. And this is one of those moments because it does this horrible editing moment to his face as he reacts like, I can't believe he offended me in front of everyone on the bridge. Everyone is laughing. Oh, oh, oh. And it's absolutely terrible. It's bad writing. It's very bad writing. It's really bad writing, and there's some moment throughout the film, and it upsets me to say this as well, there are some moments in this film, particularly with a lot of the MacGuffins, that are quite self-indulgent for Brett Spiner, I think. And there are some moments where it's the writer whoever wrote those lines did not understand these characters at all.
Right. I wonder, I don't think none of us have the script in front of us, do we? Like the original script? Because I wonder how much, because, sometimes directors take it upon themselves to say, oh, wait, why don't you do it like this? Why don't you say this instead? And if, somebody obviously doesn't really know what's going on.
Well, it definitely fell on Stuart Baird way more than the writing, because even Deanna Troi said that he was an idiot. And she was very vocal about how he didn't know anything about Star Trek and the Star Trek world, which, the director has the ultimate influence and like you said, can take a script and make it actually sound and mean something different than the way it's written, just by not even changing the words. And that's 100% right. And it just wasn't. It wasn't. He wasn't somebody that could work together with the Star Trek lore and the writer and produce what Brent and John. But I do agree with Faye, as Brent was a little self-indulgent in this movie. That's a point that I never even really thought of, but that's 100% true.
Yeah, it's sort of just and we're going to jump around because as we always do, but like even if you jump to the very end of the movie where Data makes the ultimate sacrifice and he sacrifices himself to save the ship. Oh, but it's okay because we've got a backup. For me, and I know we're jumping way ahead here, but like for me, I felt like that kind of took some of the meaning of the sacrifice out of it. But then it's also like, oh, but Brent can always come back. Like, don't worry. I don't know if you guys feel the same or if you feel like it was totally fine, and if you want to wait to talk about it till later, that's okay too, but I think it just speaks to how self-indulgent this script can be to Brent Spiner.
Rebecca, I agree with what you're saying, particularly for the fact that the proximity for the scene of him sacrificing himself to the scene where before is sitting at Picard's desk, it's so close in time. And you're right, that takes away from Data's sacrifice. If that would have happened midpoint in the movie and then the final scene is before, you know what I mean, where like a callback, it would have been a little kind of touching. But I think the fact that it was like 5 minutes later, you know what I mean, before sitting there, it's a little, that was clunky, very much so.
Even the sacrifice doesn't feel sacrificial though, because it's like, there's no build up to it. He arrives, we get a callback to an earlier MacGuffin, and he fires the laser, he dies, but there's no emotional like build up to that. There's no lead up to that. It's just Data must be a hero. Like, we're not getting to have Picard the hero, we have Data the hero, and everybody's kind of left a bit stunned at the end. The ending is very just everybody sort of standing around going, right, okay, what just happened?
Well, when he decides this plan or whatever to get over to the other ship, he's just like, Geordi, come with me. It's like, what?
If we'd even giving us 2 minutes of him saying goodbye to Geordi would have made an
they were best friends.
He doesn't even say goodbye to his best friend. That really bugs me about this movie. He does not say goodbye. They nod at each other. That's not a goodbye. for two people who have been best friends for years, you don't even say a proper, like, I shall miss you, Geordi. Like, even that? You can't even give me that? Like...
But wait a minute. Did Geordi know that he was sacrificing himself?
I think he had to have known.
Yeah.
I think he had to have known that possibility existed.
Yeah.
Because remember that when they beam Picard over... Immediately after, the transporter shorts out. There's no way to bring him back. They all know that. Mm-hmm. So the only thing they've got is that emergency transport button that we got shown early in the movie so you could remember it existed. Mm-hmm. And then, Data slaps it on Picard, but we know that's only good for one person. And you know what I mean? Like, Geordi knew that the transporters weren't going to work. What were they going to do? Send out a shuttlecraft? I mean, that wasn't going to work either. So he had to have known. He had to have known that was a one-way trip.
The worst part is that LaForge actually had a whole box of those things back in his office.
Yeah.
That was the worst part about the whole movie. I didn't understand why he didn't just take two of them.
He's like, yeah, I just had these laying all over my desk, so I shoved them all off into a box.
Oh, I've got so many. I've just been throwing them away. Like, they're everywhere. Oh my god! If I had known.
I was using them to make my desk stable because it was a little wobbly.
I've been letting the kids play with these things.
Didn't you notice I gave one to Spot to play with?
Oh man, that's good. Good stuff.
That's the point, actually. That's the only line I would have needed. All I would have needed was either saying to Geordi, take care of Spot, and then running.
Yes.
That's all I would have needed.
If it was like, no, we don't want there to be any thoughts that there was anything between Geordi and Data, so we can't even have them say goodbye or hug each other or none of that.
Oh,
yeah. At least him telling him to take care of Spot we would have been like, oh, he knows what he's doing. We know what he's doing. Now Geordi's sad, but no.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to draw a line between, and we've talked about this in a previous episode, it's hard not to draw a line between Data and Spock, right? Mm-hmm. Because they are kind of, sort of similar characters. And of course, Spock's death in Wrath of Khan, it does also come out of nowhere to a degree, even though there are like little hints here and there. But even when he does die or when he does sacrifice himself, we still get the death scene. Mm-hmm. We still get him saying goodbye to his best friend, Jim Kirk, right? Like the whole, I have been and always shall be your friend. You can barely get the words out. And Spock, that's
a beautiful and touching scene.
Absolutely. Even though in Wrath of Khan, we are given that little hint when he puts his Katra into McCoy, but that's a whole nother movie. But if we had gotten something similar with Data, a goodbye scene, we didn't get that. We have Data saying goodbye to empty space after Picard leaves. That doesn't satisfy me. No. It just doesn't. And then 5 minutes later, as Steve mentions, we've got, B4, the special robot, sitting in the ready room oh, I don't know anything about Data. Oh my goodness. It's just ridiculous. It is definitely self-indulgent to Brent Spiner. I mean, he did co-write the script, so gave himself a big part. All
right, so that was a final scene in the movie, right?
All right, thanks for listening,
everybody. All right, thanks, Jess. Thanks for having me.
Good night, everybody. It's our quickest review ever. Oh, my God.
Yeah, who's Tom Hardy?
I know we haven't even talked about Tom, but anyway. Real quick, they go to Calaris 3.
We're getting back on track.
I know, trying to get back on track. That's why we got the breakdown. Helps me stay on track. They do drive around in this ATV-looking thing, picking up pieces of an android, which, of course, looks like Data.
Can I backtrack? I'm really sorry to interrupt you.
No, of course. Go right ahead.
I just looked at my notes and I saw something I forgot to say because we were just going on about Worf not liking Irving Berlin. Something I did like in the wedding scene is before Data starts singing, he's like, ladies, gentlemen, transgender, species.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, this was 2002. That's really cool. I like that.
You know what? You're absolutely right, which I think is what makes that whole joke about Riker being Mr. Troy even worse, because they took the time to mention transgendered species, and I'm like...
Yeah, but I don't think that they were woke in 2002. I think that was actually also meant as a joke. So it's actually even more problematic.
Well,
I don't know, because
it wouldn't be a joke.
Star Trek's always been always been very tolerant, always led the way in sort of normalizing things. And as much as it's not normal because everybody's blue and yellow and bright pink, but still it's sort of like, this is a future where anyone can love anyone, be anything that they want to be, and look, it all still works. Nothing's all fallen apart yet. Everything's okay. And I think it's I like the speech, and it's a little bit clunky, and that's why there's a couple of bits, not just the Mr. Troy, but there's another bit later when we get to it, I'll talk about it, where it's a bit like, okay, this isn't what my Trek stands for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the things that make it clunky, it's those seem to be the things that were probably added in later. Like, oh no, let's try take where you do this, and then it's like, oh well, it was his idea, so he wants to put it in or whatever. Like, because listen, if Brent Spiner was writing with other people on this, he knows how and he's funny so he's not going to make like stupid jokes necessarily. Just for, to get I just don't think that he would have necessarily wrote everything in there like that. You know what I mean? But anyway.
I think it's definitely something that Steve hit the nail on the head before about it just not being the right director with the right writing team. Yeah. And you kind of look at an example of like, J.J. Abrams, Kelvin universe, where JJ has said he's not really a Star Trek fan. He doesn't really have the love for Trek as he does for Star Wars. And so I think that that's very clear when he did the sequel, that he just like had a list of what he thought fans wanted for fan service and like checked all the boxes and then called it a day and left us with a movie that most Trek fans don't care for. And so I'm wondering if the director, it was kind of the same thing. Like, all right, let's make this movie about talking robots in space. Like I kind of wonder if that's what it was. And because I think that deep down, that may be very shocking, I think this actually is more of a Star Wars movie than a Star Trek movie, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why in a couple of places, but I think they rely heavily on space battles, which I get. It's cinematic. You want more space battles. That's fine. But there's also this whole idea of like turning away from the dark side of the Force kind of a thing. And I do think that there is more Star Wars than Star Trek in this movie, which I think is maybe why I don't like it as much, because when I see a Star Trek movie, I want that. I want my science fiction.
But it's the parts that would be like Star Wars aren't as fun as they are in Star Wars. That's the problem.
That is the problem. It's not even like a good Star Wars movie. Like it's not. I mean, we'll talk about all of that. I know we're just kind of when we kind of touch on one thing, then we're like, oh yeah, and then there's that other thing, which is fine. We'll jump all over the place. So, okay, basically, they do collect all of Data's, this other android's parts, like Easter eggs, and then there are these aliens who kind of look like they're from a Mad Max movie, and they show up, and they're chasing them in their own ATVs, and I don't know, they do this whole thing where, like, they drive off a cliff into the shuttle, like Knight Rider Turbo Boost style, and I'm just like, all right, that's a little extra, but okay. Definitely it's very thrilling. Like, you usually don't see that stuff in Star Trek.
I do want to say one of the things I did like about this scene is when they first come across the hand, like, Worf is looking around trying to figure out where this positronic, what is it, like?
Signal,
yes, thank you. I'm like, I can't think of words. but that's nothing new. Where he's trying to figure out where it's coming from, and then all of a sudden the hand comes out. Like, not necessarily. I don't necessarily like this as part of a Star Trek movie, but I just liked it in general. And it comes out, and it's like Night of the Living Dead or something. And
oh, yeah.
Like, I thought that was cool. And it's like, you could probably sort of take these kind of in a horror sort of feeling if you